Welcome to our last Sweet Life cooking demo for 2023. My name is Megan Gonzalez. I'm a registered dietitian and certified diabetes educator at the Mary and Dick Allen Diabetes Center at Hoag. Our theme for today is foods to be thankful for. And joining me today is our Hoag's executive chef, Davis Cruz, and our executive sous chef, Chris. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
Thank you, Megan. Once again, we have here Chef Chris. His last name is Bott, Chris Bott, and he will be presenting our dishes for today. So since this is his second class, I will be stepping away, watching him with my hawk eyes to make sure everything is done correctly. He's a talented young man, like I mentioned before. Like I said, for newcomers, it's the first time viewing our YouTube channel. My name is Davis Cruz. I'm the executive chef for Hoag Newport Beach and Support Irvine. I've been diabetic for 27 years. I do insulin every day, and if I can do it as a chef, you guys can do it too. So it's just managing and eating properly. With that said, I'm going to step away. Megan, Chris, take it away.
Thank you, Chef.
Well, first of all, welcome back. And thank you so much for welcoming me to be a part of your cooking classes. I hope to share my knowledge as much as Chef Davis Cruz has in the past. And so for now, we're going to go ahead and dive right in. So today we have a turkey and barley soup. So we're going to be utilizing these recipes in the month of November. So these are recipes that you can use for your Thanksgiving dinner, something that's not just cut and dry, Thanksgiving turkey, you have your sides. Sometimes we want to have those hearty meals, and so we're going to prepare some hearty meals that you can use turkey for, as well as some other ingredients that are in season during that month. So you can kind of spice up your Thanksgiving dinner. Instead of the classic Thanksgiving dinner, you're going to have a new salad, a new soup, and people are going to gravitate towards those things and be like, whoa, now you're a chef. You're home cooking, but now I have salad, soup, Thanksgiving turkey, sides. So we're going to go dive right into our turkey and barley soup. So right over here, we have our barley that's cooking in a small saute pan. We're going to go ahead and give it a taste. Barley is one of those things you want to cook for about 20 minutes. As you can see here, we've already been kind of stepped ahead.
And barley is great grain. It's high in fiber. It does contain some carbohydrates. Obviously, that is the portion size is controlled. Has a little bit of protein in there and very low fat. So great for this time of year, and will be great addition to the soup.
So now that we have our barley done, we can go ahead and start with our mise en place. When we have everything ready. So the mise en place is basically just a French term that says mess in place. So you're going to have all your ingredients, your vegetables, your herbs, your seasonings, your proteins, anything that you're going to be using for a soup or a salad, because those kind of items usually have multiple components. So the better prep you have ahead of time, the quicker your soup will cook and the cleaner your kitchen will be. So now, traditionally, this soup, obviously, we would cook in a large stock pot, but we're going to do it in a saute pan so you at home can see what is happening, okay? So, TV magic, we're going to have our carrots, our onion, and our celery, as well as our mushrooms. So this is kind of your classic mirepoix. This is a very basic vegetable component that we use for lots of soups, lots of sauces. And so you want to fortify it with the mushrooms. Mushrooms is a good way to incorporate some added nutrients that Megan can probably talk a little more about, but you don't have to use just white button mushrooms. We can use multiple kinds of mushrooms for this, such as nice sturdy mushrooms. So here we have our white button mushrooms. But if you were to use a shiitake mushroom or a portobello mushroom, those are great as well. They hold their shape, you can cook them pretty heavily, and then they also add lots of flavor and nutrients to your soup. So once we get our saute pan nice and warm, we're going to start off with a little bit of olive oil.
Our heart healthy fat.
So now the key to olive oil, as you've seen probably in past classes with Chef Davis, we have paso olive oil, the paso olivio. So this is coming from Paso Robles, California, hence the name. You can actually buy this online as well. It's a great olive oil to use. It has kind of a higher price point, but you get what you pay for. And we use this here at Hoag Hospital in Newport Beach because it was a benefactor that gave us a nice donation, something you guys have probably heard in the past. For newcomers, if you haven't, this is an excellent olive oil to use. Don't heat it up too hot. You want to make sure when you use good olive oils that you don't heat it up too hot. And when you're making dressings, you want to make sure you're not whisking them too much. You want to treat them nice and steady to make sure they don't burn and they don't become bitter. Because your olive oils, if they're not treated right, stored right, away from sunlight, hence why it's in a black bottle, you can really get those fruity aroma flavors into your soups, your vegetables, or your sauces. So excellent olive oil will pay off. Okay, so we got our olive oil in. Now you can see the olive oil is starting to kind of loosen up a little bit. Once it's nice and loose, we're going to wait. And we're going to add our vegetables. Onion first. Why onion first? Well, other vegetables have a lot of water content in them. Onions actually don't have that much water content in them. They actually have much more of a sugar content. So we usually sweat our onions first to kind of release that sweet aroma, but we don't want to caramelize them right away, okay? So now we can go ahead and start with our celery and our carrots. And now you might ask, why did I not add the mushrooms yet? So the mushrooms have a lot of water content in them, okay? So what we're gonna do is we're gonna mix up our vegetables here. And once we start to get that heat, then we can add our mushrooms. Because once you add the mushrooms in a cold pan, you'll start to see a lot of water come out of them. And we kind of don't want that. We want it to be able to remove the moisture content in our vegetables. The less moisture content you have in your vegetables, the stronger the flavor. So you're really cooking out, because water, there's no flavor, but the vegetables have the flavor. So cook out the water content, then you'll have a stronger flavor when you're coming to your mirepoix vegetable, okay? So let's get this mixed up. And so Megan, while I'm cooking this mirepoix, I touched base a little bit on the mushrooms that we were using before. Are there different kinds of nutrient information within different kinds of mushrooms?
Of course, there's different nutrient compositions. They're all fairly similar, good source of vitamins, B vitamins, minerals. And so nutrition-wise, if you would substitute a different type of mushroom in this recipe, you wouldn't really be changing much on the nutrition information that's here. The nice thing with vegetables is they're all very low calorie. And even like Chris was saying with the onions, even though they kind of have that sugary flavor, just to be clear, there's no sugar in the onions, so they won't affect your blood sugar. They're considered a free vegetable, so just wanted to clarify that for everyone. So, and another thing just to add in, because I know a lot of us are looking for like quick, easy things these days, is you can now buy in most grocery stores the mirepoix already cut up. So the carrots, celery, onions already cut up. Easy to do. You can even buy mushrooms already cut up as well too. So that's true for a lot of vegetables. It's just, to make things easy, cooking healthy does require some meal prep. But again, it can be done. You just have to plan ahead. That's what meal prepping is.
And so with the meal prepping, like she said, this is really going to expedite the process, right? So I'm already starting to cook. You're not watching me chop up our vegetables and stuff. So we understand that that can take some time. However, a little trick I like to do at home is just have these kinds of vegetables chopped, ready to go. So when you go to the store, you buy your carrots, your celery, onion, chop them, get them done, leave them in the fridge. They'll last you for at least a week. And in that time, you can use some of it and just start cooking right away. It really saves a lot of time. So there's a little tip from me, okay?
Great tip. Thank you, Chris.
And so to touch base on the onions earlier, so that's why I mentioned with the onions, we only sweat them. We don't want to caramelize them, because once they start to develop some color, that's when we talk about the content that she had mentioned earlier. But if we just sweat them out, then we're okay. You have your free vegetable, you still get a lot of the nutritionals and the fibers that you would get from eating it with less cooking. So remember, the more we cook, the more we can kind of denature our nutrients, okay? So we want to make this a quick process. So I added the mushrooms in once I started hearing that sizzle. That sizzle means the water content's gone, and now we're starting to saute the actual vegetable portion of it, okay? And so now, vegetables are going. So one thing I like to do to make sure we develop flavor is to lightly season as you cook, okay? So with the recipe, we have a total amount of a ½ teaspoon of salt and a ½ teaspoon of ground black pepper. So why don't we season our vegetables so they have some flavor? Because if you season it at the end, you season the whole soup, which can be nice, but if you haven't seasoned throughout the dish, there could be an unbalance. You could be only tasting salt. Whereas if we add the seasonings to the food while we're cooking, it'll kind of develop and make a stronger flavor for the vegetable. Whereas if we were to leave it plain throughout the cooking process, we would not be able to develop the same flavors.
And another point too, for those of you who are following a low salt diet, you can always modify this, right, Chef Chris?
Absolutely.
To make it fit only your dietary needs as well as your taste, right?
Correct.
Tasting as we go, maybe adding a little bit more pepper and less salt, again, just to stick with a lower salt, more heart healthy diet.
And so with that being said, this seasoning is just going to help really bring out the flavor of the vegetable, but we're not going to over season. We want to make sure we follow our recipes, but season the components that you want to have flavor. So the vegetables, if we don't season, you will not have the flavor. So what we're going to do is now we're starting to develop the flavors. They're starting to, what I like to call is compound them. Okay, so it's not just cut and dry, carrot, celery, onion, put water, everything. It all goes at the same time, bring it to a boil. No, no, no. Saute them, take your time. Now, if you were here, the smell is starting to come. So now I know that the flavor is there. Once the smell is there, the flavor is there. A lot of the times you'll be at home and you'll smell something, you'll know it's done. You're like, well, I smell the bacon in the oven. Maybe I should go check it. It's probably done. So remember, the flavor gets released once the cooking process has been almost finished. So with that being said, we got our vegetables in. So now let's add our chopped up turkey. So now, turkey at this time of year is a great time to really stock up on some proteins. Okay, so turkey, you can buy turkey, all year round, right? But during this time of year, you get a big giant bird and then you got to use it, you have leftovers. Well, before we get there, maybe you have your bird and you could use some of it before cooking the whole thing, meaning taking some meat off of the sides or using a little bit of the breast. So in this case, we took a small section of the breast, chopped them up, cooked them, and so now they're ready for our hearty soup. Okay? So we're going to go on in. And using chicken breast will really give you excellent flavor with less fat.
Yes, the breast, the white meat is always the lower fat portion, and it'll taste great in something like this, a soup, because it's got all those flavors, right, Chef Chris?
Yes, it's got all the flavors, and as well as we're going to be fortifying this with some stock and our barley. So once that all kind of melts together, we'll let it sit, simmer, and then we'll have our turkey barley soup. So now we're almost there. We've got our vegetables here. Mushrooms are starting to get a little bit of color on them. The onions are starting to become see-through, so now I'm starting to smell the flavors. Everything's starting to come together, right? So once your soup, vegetable component, your protein component is all there, now we're gonna start adding the broth to finish our soup. So here we have some low sodium chicken broth that you can buy at the store. There's usually different kinds of broths that you can buy. Also, you'll find stock, right? So what's the difference between a broth and a stock? Well, a stock will have bones. Stock is what's going to be advertised as, oh, you'll look at the ingredients and it'll say free range chicken, or it'll say whole chicken, but if you look at broths, it'll usually say something like ground chicken, or it'll say ground meats, because they're usually used without bone. So broth is made with all the components of meat. Stock is made with the components of bones, because the bones have a component called gelatin, right? So when you cook a stock for a really long time and you see it the next day, it's like kind of jello-y. That's from the gelatin that comes from the bones from a stock, right? So we are going to use broth because the broth will have less fat content. It'll be more flavor, and you'll have a better chance of finding your low sodium, fat-free broth versus stock in the store. So broth is usually the healthier option. So go ahead.
Yeah, and the low sodium is available in most stores as well. You have to look a little harder sometimes on the shelf, but it should be right next to the regular. And again, there's so much good flavor in this soup that you're not going to miss the less salt that we're getting here in the broth.
Correct, correct. So you really want to develop flavor without adding too much salt, sugars, those things that are considered flavor enhancers, right? Which is why we seasoned our vegetables in the beginning. So if we season now, what am I seasoning? I'm just seasoning the broth. Well, our broth has all kinds of flavor. It's already got the vegetables, it's already got the chicken, it's got everything in there. But in order to develop that flavor, we want to season the things that have had no love, is what I like to call. So your vegetables have had no love. We added the love with a little bit of the seasoning that was here on our recipe. Once we bring it to a simmer, we can taste it and adjust if needed. So now we've added our broth to our hot pan. We've got everything in here, but we have not added our barley. Now, why is that? Well, our barley's been cooked. So with that said, if we added it now, if we added this barley now and then bring it to a boil, it'll become mushy. We don't want that. The barley will continue to cook, and you really want to treat it like a pasta, but it's not a pasta. It's a healthy grain. But treat it as the same as pasta when it comes to the cooking content of it. So right now, as you can see, it's already starting to bunch up a little because it's been cooked just right. Okay? If this overcooks, it'll become mushy. You won't be able to separate it. It only becomes, and it won't work out for your soup. You want everything to kind of separate. So when you take a spoonful of your soup, you get one little bite of everything in one spoon. So now, Megan, can you use other grains for this soup? What would you suggest from a nutritional standpoint besides barley? Because there's all kinds. There's cracked wheat, there's quinoa, there's all kinds of different items. But what would be a good fortifying grain that you would suggest for you, the soup?
I mean, from a nutritional perspective, quinoa is a great one if that works because you're the chef.
Absolutely.
But yes, quinoa also really good whole grain, ancient grain, has a little bit more higher protein content, still high fiber. So that would be a great one to use. But I know there's probably other grains, as you mentioned, Chef Chris, that you could use as well. Would slightly change the nutritional content, but I would say not significantly.
Excellent. And the reason why I ask that is because, well, barley, you see the size of it. It's a nice small grain. Most grains are quite small, right? And so you want to have something that, well, what if I don't have barley at the store or at home? Well, if you have some quinoa, you have some cracked wheat, or even farro, they're all generally around the same size. They cook, you can cook them around this, you can cook them with the same techniques. What I like to cook my grains in is called a pasta method. So a lot of the times people will look for, except for couscous. You can use it for pretty much any grain except couscous, and I'll explain why. So grains, you cook them in a pasta method because they have this content of where if you overcook them, they'll get sticky, and we don't want that. But if you have a large pot with water, you throw the grains in and they kind of roll and boil, they're kind of boiling and they're all loose, you can scoop them up with a spoon and test and see as you go along. Whereas if you were cooking your barley in equal parts of water, you might run out of water. You'll run into uneven cooking of the grains. So you ask yourself, well, I've never really cooked barley before. I've never cooked quinoa. I've never cooked farro. That's okay. That's okay. I know you've cooked pasta. So just bring a pot full of water, throw it in there, let it boil, a slotted spoon so you can check. And the most important lesson to take from that is to give your grains room. Give them space to cook. You don't want to overpack your pan. You don't want to overpack your pot. You want to let those grains cook loosely so that you can drain them and they don't stick. They should look just like that, where they can fall apart. So now, we're waiting for our soup to come to a boil. And once that happens, we can taste. But with that being said, I think maybe we can go ahead and start on our salad.
Sounds great.
So we're going to be doing our Thanksgiving winter salad with a champagne vinaigrette. Now, it's also a good thing to start, during Thanksgiving time. We're multitasking. We're doing so much. So it's probably a good thing you start your things like soups, your gravies, your turkeys, things that take quite some time. So you can start other items that don't take as much time, okay? So, we're gonna start off with making a vinaigrette. So, a vinaigrette, a basic vinaigrette, is an emulsification of oil and vinegars, okay? And you can usually do a ratio. So a lot of people like to, measure things out, but I'll give you a trick. Just a ratio. 1 part to 2 part. That's all you need. 1 part of acid, which could be your vinegar, lemon juice, wine, or wine vinegars. And then the 2 part will be your good fats, such as olive oils. It could be usually a plain oil, olive oil, a good grapeseed oil, avocado oil, things that have nice high fat, good fats, help incorporate with vinegars to create a nice emulsification. And an emulsification is what you see at the store. When you shake your Italian dressings or your balsamic dressings, they're kind of thick, but they're thin. That's because they're emulsified. So we're gonna make an emulsification together. We're gonna start off, we have our champagne vinegar, and we also have lemon juice. So we're gonna go ahead and add our acid, which is our champagne vinegar. We're gonna add about 3 tablespoons.
And Chef, could you use what if you didn't have champagne vinegar? Could you substitute it for a different type of vinegar?
Absolutely. So champagne vinegar, a lot of the times they have little descriptions on the front of the vinegars that kind of help people, decide what kind of vinegars they want to buy. So with the champagne wine vinegar, it says a light, crisp, and delicate flavor, ideal for vinaigrette and cheese dishes. That sounds great. Well, another way to do that is smell it. Ooh, it's pretty strong. What is another strong vinegar? Well, let's look at the color. So color, smell, flavor are 3 things you always want to look out for when testing different vinegars. Now, I can tell you right away that obviously a white vinegar or a rice vinegar would be a great alternative to this. However, if you had no clue and you didn't know anything about vinegars, which sometimes is the case, vinegars are one of the things that people kind of shy away from. They're strong flavors, and there's all kinds of different vinegars, and a lot of people use it for cleaning, right? So no, in my world, we use it for flavor, okay? So if you weren't using a champagne vinegar, you can easily use a white vinegar or a rice vinegar. However, champagne has been made from using the same grapes that make champagne, right? So you can, for example, there's balsamic vinegar, correct? So that balsamic vinegar is made from grapes, just regular grapes. So that lets you know that vinegars come from fruits. They're delicious items to use in your cooking. So look out for some really, really nice. You can play with this dressing. It can be a champagne vinegar, white balsamic vinegar, balsamic vinegar. But for this recipe, we're going to use a champagne vinegar today, in combination of some lemon juice. So now you're saying, but those are 2 acids. That's right. You can add multiple acids. You can use multiple oils, as well as your seasonings, herbs, to make a dressing. Vinaigrettes are really fun. It gives you time to be creative. So we're making this totally from scratch. We're going to add our lemon juice, about 2 tablespoons. Okay. And so now we ask, what's the fat? And I'll show you. We have our honey, delicious, sweetener, but you can also use agave sweetener, things that don't bring up your blood sugar, and something that I know Megan knows a little bit more about. We've talked about in the past using sweeteners such as monk fruit and agave. So for this recipe, we have honey, but it can absolutely be substituted for another sweetener as well.
And that's absolutely true, Chef. And this is such a small amount of honey. It's 1.5 teaspoons, that even this little bit wouldn't cause a significant rise to your blood sugar. So it's really your choice, a matter of taste as well. But again, this is such a small amount, just giving a little bit of sweetness and to offset the acid. Right, Chef?
That's absolutely right. So whenever you're using vinegars, you want to offset that acid or that strong flavor with something that is going to balance it out. So a lot of people will use honeys, agaves, sweeteners, And even in other dressings, they'll use pure sugar, but we're not doing that today. There's other alternatives to make the same food better and healthier. And so that's what we're going to be doing today. So let's go ahead and add our honey. We're going to add our 1.5 tablespoons.
1.5 teaspoons.
Oh, excuse me. We're going to add teaspoons. So we've already added our teaspoons, so we're going to stop right there. That's just to offset that sour from the acid, from our lemon juice and our vinegar. Okay? So now, how do we do an emulsification? We add and whisk slowly. Okay? So we have our 1 parts, and we go, well, now I need to add my 3 parts. Okay? Or my 2 parts, excuse me. So we have 3 tablespoons of our vinegar. So what's double 3 tablespoons? Well, that's going to be 6 tablespoons. How many ounces are in 3 tablespoons? 2 ounces. Okay? Now, that recipe conversion can come down the line a little bit later, but I'll give you a tip. Just remember, 3, 2, 8. So 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon. 3 tablespoons equals 2 ounces. And in those ounces, you need 8 ounces to make 1 cup. Okay, so remember, 3, 2, 8. It's a little trick that I like to use, okay? So I'm going to add about 4 ounces of oil, which is going to equate to 6 tablespoons of oil, double our vinegar. So remember, 1 to 2, 1 part vinegar, 2 parts of your emulsification of fat, of good fats, such as your olive oil. So now we're going to start whisking slowly, okay? And what you're going to see, some bubbles are starting to happen, and that's the aeration that we're going to add the oil into. So now those bubbles are going to start catching the oil. Now, a lot of times you'll see people, add their dressings and just put them in a jar and shake them. That works too, but that hasn't been added slowly. So then the next day, you'll see it separate. And so what we're doing right now, if done correctly, you should be able to hold this dressing till the next day, and it'll be nice and thick.
So that's a great tip if you want to make this ahead of time, like Chef was saying earlier, maybe for Thanksgiving or a holiday get together, that you could make that ahead of time.
So you're starting to see the color change. You're starting to see it's starting to get thicker. And you'll notice in the feel of your whisk. You'll be whisking, you're like, whoa, I have to start whisking harder. You start to you actually feel the viscosity change, the texture of this change. And that's how you know you have a successful emulsification, okay?
Great tips that you only get by watching our cooking class.
Okay. So, you can see how it hasn't separated. It's completely solid all together. That's what we're looking for, okay? Vinaigrette is now done. So, let's start dressing our salad.
All right.
So in our salad, we have some chopped hazelnuts and some chives. Now, I like to add a little bit inside the salad and as well as on top. So we're gonna go ahead and do that, okay? And the reason why I like to save some of these ingredients to put it right on top is because usually when you toss your salad, the heavy ingredients will fall to the bottom, correct? And so now, when the ingredients fall to the bottom and you take your salad out onto a plate, those ingredients will fall right back on top. But they're gonna be dressed up, they're all gonna be mixed around, and so we're gonna save some of these ingredients to garnish on the top, okay? So now we have some chives. And these chives are basically thin green onions. They're grown in colder environments, which is why they're not as readily available. You'll have a harder time finding these chives in the summer than you will in the winter. So if you have a hard time finding chives, green onion will work just as well, okay? Okay. So we're gonna add our chives. We've got our hazelnuts. we're going to add our crumbled blue cheese.
And the crumbled blue cheese does have some salt. Again, for those of you who are watching the salt in your diet, I personally think blue cheese has such a good strong flavor that you could maybe use a little bit less if you wanted to cut back on some of the salt, because again, you just need a little bit for some flavoring. But again, it's not adding too much. The sodium content of the salad is fairly low in general.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Megan. So now we're going to finish with our pomegranate. So here we have a fresh pomegranate. Now, we don't want to just slice right into it. Why? If you do that, you'll actually pop the seeds and it'll become kind of a mess, right? So how do we get our pomegranate seeds without staining our clothes and staining your cutting board and staining pretty much everything around you? So I'm going to show you a little trick on how to segment and separate your pomegranate. So usually you start off by doing bias cuts. So we're going to start off doing one little incision here. See how that juice already comes out? So we're going to go like that all the way around, okay? 1, 2, 3. So you see what's happening? It's kind of up, down. I call it the little mountains or little M's. So we're going to go all the way up around this whole thing, okay? Now, I am doing this, oh, my apologies, Megan. I am doing this in the air just to kind of show you, but if you wanted to be safe at home, set it down on the side.
Yeah, probably better for most of
Go
us that
down
aren't
like this,
professional
okay?
chefs like you, definitely. But again, another tip that you'd only get by watching our cooking show here with these, how to correctly cut into a pomegranate. So pomegranates have lots of good vitamins in it. They're high in potassium, vitamin C, vitamin K, folate, some B vitamins as well. So it's a great fruit for this time of year. And of course, this is one of the main contributors to the carbohydrate content of the salad. But again, in general, this is a very low carbohydrate salad, so shouldn't have a huge impact on your blood sugar.
That's right. Pomegranates are excellent to juice as well. So you've probably seen some of the earlier classes with Chef Davis Cruz that you can use these pomegranates for some excellent juice as well. So right here, you can see the cuts. They're up and down, up and down, up and down. And you ask, well, why is that? So we're doing that because we want to separate this without popping the seeds, okay? So now you'll pop in to one of the little M's that you made, and you're just going to pull it right apart. You see that? So you kind of stick your thumbs into one of the M's that you've made, and you just pull. Okay? And that's it. So now we've opened our pomegranate. We haven't sliced right through the seeds. We don't have a giant pomegranate mess. So now you take out the segments, and they have segments, if you can see, they have little sections. You can just pull these sections apart. And you look at, they're just falling off. You just peel them off, take them off. And so now, could you imagine if we had sliced this directly in half, trying to do this? You would never be able to see these pomegranates. It would just be a mess. So it's actually a really good trick. It takes a little bit of extra time, but it will pay off for you in the end. Okay. So you see this little section? Has this little membrane around it. You don't want that. It's very bitter. Any type of white piths that you see inside of oranges, lemons, bell peppers, they usually have a very, very bitter taste to them. So you just remove those, and they just pop right out.
Yes, and again, it's all about portion sizes here. So we're just using 1/3 cup of pomegranate seeds
Correct.
for the entire recipe. And this does yield 10 servings. So again, the amount you get would be pretty small. That's why it is a lower carb salad here. But again, pomegranate just looks so festive for this time of year, and again, adds good nutrition to the salad.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they're just so delicious. When they're in season, they're full of that juice. They're so good for you, good for your heart, and good for your palate, good for flavor. Okay? So look at that. We've got quite a few. I haven't even touched the other fruit yet. Okay, and so what I would like to do is reserve the rest of these pomegranates for juice, or sometimes I like to add it to my cranberry sauce, making a cranberry pomegranate sauce, which is really excellent. So we're going to go ahead and put the rest of this to the side, okay? So now we're going to add some of our pomegranates. And so as you can see, we're almost done with our salad, and our soup's almost done as well. I'm starting to see a nice little boil. We're actually multitasking, making sure that if we're rushing and doing our Thanksgiving dinner, that looks like we're going to be on time today. Okay, so now we have a simmer going on our soup. We have our garnishes and everything ready for our salad. So let's go ahead and finish up our dishes. Now that this is coming to a simmer, we're going to add our barley. Give that a nice little stir. Okay, now that that barley's in, we want to bring that back up to a simmer, taste, and then we'll be good to go. Now, onto our salad. We've got our greens, we've got our vinaigrette, we've got our blue cheese, we've got our chopped hazelnuts, our pomegranates, our chives. So now all that's left is to dress it. We're going to pour our vinaigrette. Now, the amount of vinaigrette you add to your salad is up to your discretion. Some people like a lightly tossed salad, or some people like to really taste that dressing. But I like to lightly toss the salad because you really want to be able to complement each ingredient that's in your salad. You want to complement the pomegranates, the cheese, you want it to give it an extra flavor instead of masking it. So I usually like to add about 2 or 3 tablespoons just to start. Toss, taste. Okay, it's not overdressed, then we get to serve, okay? So I've got my gloves. We're gonna just go ahead and get right in there, okay?
And I think that's a great tip, Chef, is to add a little bit, always taste first, and then again, according to your taste or your
Correct.
nutritional needs, that you can always add more if needed. Because once you put on too much, it's almost, you're out of luck at that
You
point.
can always add, but you can never take away, okay? So now we haven't even used all of our ingredients because we saved everything to top it off. So let's go ahead and do that. So you see what's happening here? Where did my ingredients go? They all fell to the bottom. Remember, that's why we save some of these ingredients to toss them with the vinaigrette flavor, but as well as some on the side that have not been tossed with the dressing, so you can put right on top of the salad so you can see everything in there. It's a little trick to make because we eat with our eyes. It can taste delicious, but it's got to look good.
Definitely, very important.
Yes, I believe that there's an actual study done that we eat 80% of the dish with our eyes. So if it doesn't look good, it's not going to taste good, even if it actually does taste good. So it's weird how our minds work, and that there's so many of these studies based on how we think about our food. And one of them is with our eyes. So we have our delicious salad. We're going to start garnishing it up with our pomegranates. And something you can do too is make a little garnish salad, is what I like to call it. You mix up all of your ingredients that are about, and the reason why it works is because they're all the same size. You want to look for things that are all in the same size because you can eat it all with the same spoon in one bite. If you have something that's bigger and smaller, they're not all going to fit on the same spoon, therefore you won't get the same bite. And we want you to have that same bite because we want you to have all that flavor. So we're going to mix up our pomegranates, our cheese, and our hazelnuts. I'm just going to stick that right on top. There you go.
Wow, looks great.
Thank you so much, Megan. So now our salad's ready. Well, what about my soup? Oh, it's come to a simmer. All of our ingredients are in there. Let's give it a taste. So you see that bite? I've got everything on there. Very important. When you're cooking soups or salads, it should be the same size, all of your ingredients. Delicious. Let's go ahead and dish it up. And there we have our turkey and barley soup and our Thanksgiving winter salad with a champagne vinaigrette.
Looks wonderful. Thank you so much, Chef.
Thank you so much. Hope to see you next time, everyone.
Thank you all so much for tuning in today. Please join us next year for more of our great Sweet Life cooking demonstrations. I would encourage you all to go online to our website, www.hoag.org/diabetes-events, and we will soon have posted all the cooking demonstrations for 2024. So again, thank you for tuning in, and stay healthy.